Are drugs good or bad? Now, it really depends, traditionally. And experientially. Can't help but notice everything good we've ever liked about most things does reach a point where it's a little much, you know? And this is true even about, you know, the best things. Now, Shlomo Karlebach does say that's one of the differences between things in the holy and things in the stam, is like, do you get tired of them? If something gets old, it must not be so holy. And this is a big kitrug against all the things in the holy that we experience, chas v'shalom, as somehow annoying or out of context. You know, like anything really real and good to us, we somehow never get tired of. And I remember as a kid, I noticed this about like rice. Just rice. Like I would come home, I'd be hungry, and I would have rice. I'm like, oh boy, it's rice. And I'd like, you know what? I never get tired of eating rice. Like I do in the short term, like, okay, I gotta go stop eating rice now and like go for a walk. But I would never quite be tired of the thing that was exciting about, like, yay, it's rice again. And this is the recurring test of many different things in our lives. Because there's the Torahs and the avodas that keep us alive. And chas v'shalom, there is sometimes this other experience of the Torahs and the avodas as somehow like a tircha. Like let's say chas v'shalom, an inconvenience, and even more chas v'shalom, like torturous, just being trapped in a room, chas v'shalom. And a lot of the hope of Chassidus, and I think especially expressed in like Shlomo's relationship to Chassidus, was it can't be these things are stupid. I think you have this in Rav Kook also, right? It can't be that these things are stupid. It must be these things are infinitely sustaining. We must just be alienated from what they're about. And I think this is also the core of Chazal. You know, the Chiddush of Chazal away from the Beis HaMikdash is like, there's something in the Beis HaMikdash that Nebuch does not seem to quite be Mekayim in the Beis HaMikdash because it's run by like terrible people, or they're just doing everything the way we're supposed to do it instead of the way it's supposed to be. And this is the big stira that I think is the beginning of both Yiddishkeit, of Chassidus, and of popular drug use on some level, right? Like there's a thing you want to be on the level, and then when you get there and it's not, it's very confusing until you find the missing thing that made it possible. And a lot of the mashal for the Torah as the drug itself is already in the Gemara, right? Sam Chaim and Sam Maves, to those who like Misha Zochin, Misha Lo Zochin. And there the main difference is like, well, why are you doing it? You know, are you doing it in order to be big, for the kavod? And you could say kavod means a lot of things, right? All parnasa is kavod. All decoration is kavod. All way you're understood and expressed. You know, like the heart of the fool longs to express itself, like Shlomo Melech says. And we are all that fool. Baruch Hashem, we all long to be expressed. And that's a lot of why we look for good Torahs, you know, things you can say that people will appreciate hearing, and even bigger, things you can say with a full heart. I grew up, I really got into davening as a kid. You know, davening by yourself, like Baruch Hashem, you know, it's nice to feel like God is nearby. It's nice to feel like there's someone you can talk to. But davening from an amud in front of a room was very powerful as a kid, because it meant I could finally make sounds I generally couldn't make. Because as a kid, the sounds you make are very naturally regulated by how annoyed people are by you. You know? And if your family loves you, parents love you, grandparents never get tired of you, but then you go to school. And you'll meet kids who are just very annoyed at any number of the annoying things you say or how you say it. Chas v'shalom, it's how people get shamed out of having accents or ethnicities at all. And part of the bracha of a way to daven, of just like you could just scream and make the loudest noise in your whole heart, as long as you were saying the thing you're like, Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Le'omei Almaya. And it used to break my heart how much people didn't say it louder, you know? Because if they say it loud, then I can say it loud. And if no one's saying it loud, well, now I'm the guy saying it loud. And a lot of how I got into Chassidus and a lot into Shlomo Torah was really just opportunities to scream with your whole heart. Just opportunities to actually find something you could say comfortably with your whole heart, like Hashem Echad, you know. There are socially acceptable circumstances where just Hashem Elokim is really just everyone saying it back and forth to each other, each one louder. It's arguably one of the funner parts of Yom Kippur. At the very end, you just start screaming back and forth to each other. Baruch Shem Kavod. But on the other hand, if you have to scream all the time, it's very exhausting. Part of the Chiddush of Chana in Sefer Shmuel is that she doesn't have to scream, you know. Part of the Chiddush that Eliyahu NAVI recognizes in Har Sinai when he goes and fasts there, right? He's a little heartbroken that everything got so quiet. And he tells a quick little poem about like how it used to be we all heard the voice in Har Sinai, and then we all just said, hey, can you just tone it down a little bit? It's just a little much. Can you just like not kill us with your voice so we can hear what you're saying? And he did, but then Eliyahu Navi's heartbroken. He fasts for 40 days and he goes back to Har Sinai, and he realizes after 40 days, when he finally has the vision, that the voice never went away. It just became quiet. It just became quiet. Kol mamadaka. And there's something I think is true in Judaism writ large, in the Torah writ very large, and Chassidus Dafka, and I'd say even like Shlomo Torah, even more intimately, where there is a kol mamadaka saying the things that we are also sort of quietly screaming ourselves. It's one of the shots on Chashmal, right? Before Chashmal was electricity, it was the silence that screams or speaks, you know, or the whisper that somehow says more than you could say. And part of the heartbreak of loving the Torah and loving the mitzvahs and loving the avoda is how much at the moments where it feels the most invited is also where it can feel the most like far away from being the thing, chas v'shalom. And this is so much of why chidushim in the Torah are, I don't even want to say important, unavoidable. I was once arguing with the Satmar Chassid about this famous injunction from, I think, the Chasam Sofer, Chidush Asher Min Torah. It's a foundational rallying thing within all Frumkeit. Chidush Asher Min Torah. But you could hear it the other way, right? Torah forces chidushim. Can't help but force chidushim. Chidush Asur can't, it's just bound up in what the Torah is, because the Torah is in relationship to the chidushim that are our lives. Pamayim, we mentioned every kiddush, you know, Zeichel L'Maseh bereishit, and I want to take responsibility for the challenge of integrating a chiddush that is not a chiddush, by which I mean drug use in the context of davening, and to a lesser degree doing mitzvahs, right? Like, it might slow you down from giving tzedakah, right? Like, hold on, all right, now I get my wallet. But that is a little bit how fundraising works, if I understand correctly. I don't know how fundraising works. I'm not from LA. I don't know how fundraising works. But it's a problem to claim that something is part of the Torah in a place where we never saw it. And it's a problem to not notice what the Torah depends on. Because part of the mystery and chiddush of Shlomo's Torah is how does a Shlomo happen, and how much can the things that made like one generation of the avoda so much the avoda and so much the place and theater of the revelation still be the place where we hear it. And part of the thesis of this book is that drugs are involved. Now, this is already stupid and already problematic to say that anything depends on drugs, right? How could anything depend on drugs? But this is part of the steer with Kiddush itself. How can Kiddush depend on drugs? It doesn't. So grape juice also counts, but sugar, one of the central arguments in the book is that we learn out traditionally a relationship to the drugs we didn't have access to from the ones we did, which is on the one hand wine and on the other hand honey. These are the two sort of understood, I think, kruvim, and the third is medicine writ large. But I think medicine is a bit of a strong word for the way we use sacramental drugs. I think, medicine is very different, because medicine, like it's very regulated, you're not excited about it, it's not going to be fun. But Kiddush really could be fun. Kiddush, you're like chilling, The best case scenario of all the best medicines is that it will be wonderful. And that the wonderfulness itself is part of the medicine. And this is part of the hope that we never needed actual drugs, but that the Torah itself would be all the drugs we needed. In much the same way that I think a lot of the early Hasidim, like Rav Nachman, talked about not needing food, but just the nourishment from the letters themselves, right? It's something, a little bit of a mean joke in saying that, maybe you don't really need food. Maybe if you were just yonik from the letters themselves and the energies themselves, you wouldn't need material food. It's a little unfair. It's a lot of pressure to put on kids. Like, kids keep eating. Why don't you just yonik from the letters themselves? It can't be just a nusach that way. And this is a very big Shlomo Torah about the change that happened with the birth of Yitzchak Avinu, where once upon a time, the world was much more stable. Even the miracles were more stable. You would do a certain thing and a certain thing would happen. Can you imagine? You would Shlomo talks about the innovation of falling in love that was part of Abraham and Sarah's relationship. And it was like a sea change in the world, where suddenly, instead of, he compares it to like putting a quarter in a Coke machine to get soda, right? You put it in, it comes out. There was a whole new thing that feels like magic, but we're told is actually more like a miracle, more like Kriyas Yam Suf. And this is definitely my experience of applying entheogens to the avoda, where it might work and it might not, right? And we see this concern and tension very early on in the Torah. Cain and Hevel. It might not work. Cain, his korban was designed to work as much as Hevel's. And really, on the level of like sympathy and ecological, like, Cain's korban seems much closer to the Mashiach korban that Rav Kook is looking forward to. That's just barley and no more dying animals. But something was wrong in the execution, in the context, that made it not work. And I think sometimes about things like that, like also Avram Avinu and his brother Nahor. They both go in the fire, only one of them doesn't get burned. And this is the problem with trying to write and talk about drugs in the context of Hasidus and the Torah. We want a Torah that will be good no matter what, that will be safe no matter what, that will guide us helpfully no matter what. But the challenge is, the whole world is very narrow and weird. There's a lot of weird crisis all over the place. So much of the tradition in the Torah, and especially in Hasidus, is between the Kri and the Ktiv, between the Torah Shebal Peh, by which I don't just mean the Gemara, but I mean the floating experience that becomes the stories that become the Torah. And this is one of the chidushim of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov himself is the chidush, where the stories that you can't help but tell about the things that worked out better than they really should have becomes the ikar of the Torah that we give over. Because the ikar of the Torah we give over has to do with the crisis of our lives and what the world is. The things that chas v'shalom go awry a million ways, and the hope of getting the good that comes from the dangerous without having to fall into the dangerous. And this is a little bit why the Eitz Hadas is so important to the Torah, why the Sama Maves is so important to the Torah, because too much of anything is the disaster. And a lot of the mystery in, let's say, like an ecstatic Hasidus, there you go, for example, a lot of the floating hope and danger is that you would try to apply it and it wouldn't work. And I think that is part of the mystery of like trying to do something like the 60s, right? Trying to do a lot of the struggle. A lot of the struggle and a lot of the hope of my experience of like the Torah of the Moshav. Let's say Shlomo's Torah in the wake of Shlomo, right? Where everyone noticed everything that went right and everything went wrong in all of our lives. And from noticing, can't help but share both the best and the worst. And Baruch Hashem, there is the level of the Torah, how it's supposed to work. You hear that if you do this, this will happen, like the aforementioned soda machine, and that's always nice and reliable. But then there's the other thing, the things that never work the way they're supposed to, and work really well despite not being supposed to. And this is the mystery of the tzaddikim that we're impressed by, right? This is the tzaddikim that we are patient with, because we know they're tzaddikim, so okay. And then there's the tzaddikim that we're astounded by, and we just want to be able to succeed like they succeeded to whatever degree. But it's so unclear what it depends on. And the hope is that we would find what it would depend on. And I think this is part of the secret of Rabbi Shimon. Mshachta ashrecha shemen saso mechavarecha. It really is the kids that make us good. Like, it once became very clear when I first came to Moshav Modin how much of Shlomo's Torah was because of you guys, was because he was finding the best kids who cared the most about life and soul and God, and just wanted to, like, on the one hand, share the connections we had, but also bring everything we had closer to there. Because there is a crisis in the Torah almost all the time, but maybe a little more so, where the thing that becomes stagnant, chas v'shalom, the thing that becomes stable and does not reflect the Eitz Chaim at all, chas v'shalom, threatens to overcome the thing that does, And a lot of the hope is that there'll be enough little notes, little marks left in the Torah that if they saw the sign that, oh, it really is the Geula moment and really is the Geula thing, that we'd be able to notice it. That there would be some way of noticing. And I feel like this is a lot of what happened in Chassidus writ large. Like, Chassidus was very out of control for a couple years early on. And then it settled down because it was a little much. The kids were freaked out, like the stability and structures didn't exist. And once it did straighten out into stability and structures and theology and everything, that we can lean on and build families around, there's a joke I heard from David Herzberg, Zivron Lebracha, that Elimelech of Lezhinsk, he wouldn't go on Aliyat Neshamas. That wasn't what he liked to do. Everyone else is going to Aliyat Neshamas. Everyone likes to, get high and go to heaven and just get perspective and feel good. But Elimelech had been doing that for a long time. He liked Yurid Neshamas. He wanted to go to Gehenna so you could see what was really going on. Because maybe you'll get better perspective from Gehenna than you do in Gan Eden. And maybe it's a little bit the test of how closer you are to the both extremes. So one time, Elimelech Lezhinsk goes to Gehenna on a Yerida Neshama, just goes all the way down, just hurts. Who knows how he does it? It's a mystery. Presumably he does the Baal Shem Tov thing where he uses the Eitzah of how to talk to the Samech Mem when you see him. If you see the Samech Mem on the road, don't try to kill him, don't try to judge him. Be sympathetic. What do you know what he's dealing with? And then maybe he'll talk to you, and he tries it. And he has a moment in front of the Samech Mem in Gehenna when he asks the question, what's going to be with Chassidus? This whole Hasidic movement, is it going to work out? Is it going to go awry? Will things get wrong and weird? We things usually do. What's going to be? And of course, the Samech Mem just laughs and says, "Oh, brother, I've got bad news, man. It's already actually over. It's been over for years. I'm sorry. The whole Hasidic movement, it was alive for a While, and that was great. People were into it. But then some guys got some money together and they bought a shul, and that was the end." And this is a mashal for the challenge of trying to do something that's really genuinely alive and then make it really genuinely safe, which is the challenge of ecstatic culture, of rock and roll, of anything good that sustains itself from generation, anything good you can find in your life to share with your kids and grandkids that's good enough to actually say, do this and it'll actually be awesome and you won't die. Like the Seir Azazel, and you won't die. And it's very hard to have things like that reliably. So what we really need instead, and what we really have instead, is the Edut Ne'eman of each other. The people who care the most, people who notice the most, just talk to them, see what they notice, just see what they pick up on, and then maybe you'll get some good advice on how to do it. And that's what the book is about. Cannabis Chasidus. It's not a pro-drug book per se, but it's in the context. You deserve it. I think you're in there. I think you appear in it. You deserve to just have a copy. To that end, did you know how much longer we got? Okay, cool. To that end. Oh, good. Okay. Yay, welcome home. Thank you. Yay. To that end, it's a mystery how to do Shlomo Torah in Shlomo's presence, Kal v'chomer in his absence. And it's a mystery how to relate to the chidushim of Shlomo without relating to the general danger we all share of missing the point and missing the meaning. And this is an issue, let's say, with Shlomo HaMelech, the very original. Whenever any Rav or Tzaddik wants to feel I'm so good, and why did Shlomo HaMelech make all the mistakes he made? It's the moment where they lose track of what the Torah is about. And it's a very big secret what the Torah is about, because even Moshe Rabbeinu suffers from the challenge of it's very hard to say what the Torah is about without just kind of saying things like rules or just weird context stories. If you see your friend's animal suffering, feed your friend's animal. Does that mean you should hate your enemy? Does that mean you should be angry at your enemy? He's I don't know, but take care of his animal. Astounding subtleties that are hard to describe. Baruch Devorah, Naim Kamo. Excellent. See you there. Even the Malachei Shaarya have a bit of machloket about this, and apparently this is the story of creation that recurs, where the Malachei Shaarya also have a problem. It was so great, and now there's a world. And the distance between the Malachei Shaarya who are still in Shemayim and the ones who have to be on the other end of the spectrum is the story that we're commemorating every time we say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh on the one hand, and Baruch Kavod on the other hand. And similarly, within the entire Torah, there's a back and forth between good news, everything's fine, don't worry, Hashem is one, and the, oh, that's a dangerous attitude, bro. If God is really one, how are you going to blah, blah, blah? You have to be careful. And it's true, because the world is made of these extremes. And Baruch Hashem, it's nice to have a range of capacity, range of possibility. But what we come back to Chassidus and the Torah for is eitzes about how to do it. And more than anything else, like the gift Shlomo gave us, besides every Torah, besides every finger pointing to a good sefer, is each other. A good sefer, like Erez sefer, for example, the heart to look at each other. When I first came to Jerusalem and I was looking for Torah on the level of drugs, Torah on the level of being high that was worth learning in order to just live in the clouds but ground in the ground, one of the first things that came up was the difference between the trippiness of Kabbalah and the integrated trippiness of looking in people's eyes. It's a very different kind of avoda. And this was the big difference for me between the sort of Moroccan Breslov Torah that I'd first gotten into for being very accessible in Yerushalayim, where you could learn the Sefirot and the interactions and all. Very, very well studied calculus. But from Shlomo Chevra, I learned how important it was just to take a deep breath, look people in the eye and say, hey man, how you doing? And you could prove that also in there. Because a lot of the real avodah of the tzaddikim is doing the same normal things, but just a little better. And similarly, I'm already smoking weed, but finding other people who could smoke weed and then still care about their kids really did seem like the goal. Because a lot of the schism, I think, a lot of the danger in entheogenic culture and in guru culture and in spiritual culture, just stop noticing your kids. Start judging people for not being awesome enough. Sarah Silverman has a great joke about that. So, since I started learning Kabbalah, I've become really just a much better person than you. And this is the danger of feeling like we know stuff. And so much of, I think, the chiddush that's both hard to acknowledge